Okay, well, I'm going to continue to admit people who are signing in late, but we are going to go ahead and get started. And we are going to get started with the noble Colin Rittmaster. Colin is our Assistant Executive Director of the Association. He wears a ton of hats and he does a fabulous job with all of those. And certainly his biggest calling is instructional leadership and preparing administrators to help improve instruction. And so, Colin, I truly appreciate that you're here and want to turn the platform over to you.
Thank you, Tammy, and thank you for organizing and facilitating this series around for our aspiring administrators. Thank you to our teachers and others who are on this webinar today to pursue this noble calling. We truly believe in at public education, as well as those who are working in private and parochial schools, to transform lives for our students. We know each and every day you get to touch the future as teachers, having the greatest impact on student learning, whether we're remote, hybrid, or face-to-face. To take on the challenge of being a building leader, whether as an assistant principal, dean of students, or principal, is an incredible opportunity. And it's the second leading factor in student learning next to what you're doing now as a classroom teacher. So thank you for joining us today. My one piece I want to remind everybody of is that leadership is about your disposition and not your position. As a building leader, whether you're in the classroom or in an administrative position or the central office, you influence others by the way you approach others. And so as we go through today and we look at the principles of leadership, please keep in mind, it's not your position that matters, it's your disposition and what you do to influence others to advance learning for all. So thanks for joining us today. And Tammy, thank you for facilitating.
Thank you, Colin, for those wise words. That's a great way to frame what we're about to talk about today. So in today's session, what we're going to talk about is just leadership. And specifically, we're going to talk about leadership in the educational administrative career. And we're going to talk about some things that are, research-based and certainly not my original work. But I'm going to share with you lots of things that I did learn as an administrator. So for those of you who I've not met yet, my name is Tammy Jackson, and I work for MASSP as a facilitator of different trainings. And I also am the director of the Path to Leadership program, which is the alternative path to earn your certificate. And at the end of today's session, I'll be sharing information about that route. And I'll also be staying on to answer any questions that you might have about that route. Please keep in mind today that because we have only 1 hour, that'll go by so incredibly quick. And because we have a large quantity of people on, today's session really isn't meant to be very interactive. And I know that's tough sometimes, and it's certainly best when we can have a lot of interaction, but we wouldn't be able to cover a wide range of information if we were being too interactive today. So I will monitor the chat to the best of my ability, as I am a one-man show over here, or a one-woman show. And I will answer any questions that you have, but really the best way to talk with me about some specific things will be if you stay on when we are all done. So I hope that you will do that. So for today, our targets and our agenda is to look at different types of leadership styles and have you identify your personal leadership style, to look at some common traits of a successful school administrator by identifying the traits of a successful school administrator, and then to talk about some leadership strategies and to give you some strategies to add to your personal style. So the whole idea of this Aspiring Principals series is really to help those people who are thinking about becoming school administrators learn a little bit more about the position and about what it takes to be a school leader, and then to also work with those of you who are really new at the job or planning on becoming a school leader very soon, and to help reinforce what you already have learned about the school leadership position. The rest of the series will be run in a similar manner, but the end of our series together will give you an opportunity to prepare to apply for positions. And I know that that will be of particular interest to those of you who are ready to take on the challenge. So I can tell you that being a school building administrator, whether you're a principal, an assistant principal, or a dean of students, or any of all those other positions that our school leadership positions are called, It will be, without a doubt, the most difficult job that you will ever love. But I can tell you that it is one of the most honorable jobs you could ever have. There's so much importance around, and I think Colin said it best when he said the number one thing that impacts students' learning and achievement is the classroom teacher, and the second thing is the building leader. And the building leader certainly has a large impact on the classroom teacher. So you will play or do play a very significant role in that. You act as a mentor, as a parent, as a confidant, and as a cheerleader. And you go in and out of those roles all the time. And because you work with such a diverse group of people, you play those roles differently with the people that you will work with. And you'll learn that when you manage people. And quite honestly, that doesn't matter if you're doing it for school administration or if you're doing it in the business area. When you are a leader, you manage different people, and different people have different things that they need to be successful. So let's talk about some well-researched types of leadership in the area of in any area of leadership. A collaborative leader. So a collaborative leader is somebody who creates roles for staff members to help in the leadership. They are somebody that believes and understands that you cannot do this job alone. And if that's something that you learn early on in your career, you're a lot better off when you learn that it is not possible for you to run the show all by yourself. You need people to help you, and you need to empower those people to be collaborative with you in the role. Autocratic leaders hold all the power, and they take all responsibility for decision making without consultation. And some people think that it's the responsibility of a leader to have everything on their shoulders. But when that occurs, things don't often go the way that we hope that they will, because this is not the type of job you can do just all by yourself. And then we have our democratic leaders who involve subordinates in making decisions, but hold the final responsibility. And I think most leaders are this type of a leader, where you understand that you need people to help you. You need people to make the school successful beyond you. You've got to grow your leaders. You have to expand your network. But in the end, you hold responsibility for what occurs in your building, and that you take responsibility for that. So you have your finger on what's going on at all times, and you step up when something doesn't go right, but you give honor. And you, when things are going good, you give honor to those people who have helped in that case. Then we have the laissez-faire leader who gives all their responsibility to the employees. They say, I can't run the show alone. As a matter of fact, you're going to basically run the show. And that is not a great type of leadership either, because not everybody is well trained in the area as you are. And something that you also have to keep in mind is that there are certain things about your position that nobody but you can know about. And because that's the case, they can't be involved in certain situations. There are certain things that you have to step up, and you are the leader, you make the decision on it, and you make that clear. So even when you share responsibility and you collaborate, there are certain things that fall directly on you. But knowing the kinds of leadership styles that are out there is important, because you need to look at the strengths of your own leadership style and some of the challenges. So I can tell you, when I was a leader, I think I could fairly tell you, so I guess I didn't give you a little bit of background. So prior to coming to MASSP about 4 years ago, I had worked in the same school district for 32 years. And in that 32 years, I was in administration for 29 of those years as an assistant principal and then as a principal. And so I had a lot of time to make a lot of mistakes. I always say that I made probably, at least 2 mistakes every single day of my career. But I learned a lot too. And I learned a lot, and I learned more as I went on and made those mistakes and learned from the lessons. And I can say that my areas of strength were rallying people together for a cause, for creating respectful relationships. I was quick in my communication. When somebody needed me, they could find me. They didn't take them hours to locate me. I believe that I was fair. I was able to weed through what was going on and apply fairness to whether it to be to the staff or to parents or to students. I was a collaborative leader, especially once I had some experience under my belt. And I like to involve others, and I like to listen to other people's opinions and share that responsibility. But I was authoritative, and I didn't have any problem stepping up when a decision had to be made and making that decision and not blaming my decision on anybody else, taking full responsibility. But I also had challenges, plenty of them. And one of my challenges were that I moved too fast for most people. I'm like, let's go, let's go, let's go. Change is great, move, move. And for some people, they can't move that fast. They need time to process. I also found myself somewhat dismissive of employees who weren't contributing, the weak link. I would get fed up and I would say, we're moving forward. We're not going to sit back and wait for those of you who aren't ready to get on board. And sometimes you have to do that, but you also have to be careful and you have to provide opportunities for people to be ready. I always thought I was a good multitasker, but we know that when you multitask too much, you give the message that you don't have time for nonsense and you're too matter of fact because you're ready to move on to the next thing. So I needed to be a better listener at times and not be so quick to just solve the problem and move on. And one of my challenges is that I didn't sweat the small stuff. And that can either be a strength or a weakness. I believe if you don't sweat the small stuff, that small stuff will get big. But I also believe if you spend all your time on the small stuff, you don't have time to tackle the big stuff. So I just give that to you as an example because I think it's important that you do examine the type of leader you are and reflect on the type of leaders you've had. Just as we say to teachers that it's important for you to be the kind of teacher that you wish you had, the same goes for administration. Be the kind of principal that you wish you had. Think about those things that were supportive for you and those things that weren't, and come into with a lesson in that and change your leadership style so that you can be that person that you needed when you were working under a building administrator. So let's just talk about some common traits of leadership. Integrity, selflessness, enthusiasm, justice, knowledge, loyalty, courage. Those are just some of the common traits. And it doesn't matter what you're leading in and what field you're leading in, but these are areas that you have got to be clear on when you step into the role of leadership. And we're going to talk a little bit about each one of those as it applies to being a school leader. Integrity. So obviously by when we say integrity, we mean you have to tell the truth. You have to lead by example. You have to use your filter. I will say that my filter was a lot stronger at the beginning of my career than it was at the end of my career. My filter had weakened a little bit. In some ways that was okay, but in some ways I probably should have used my filter more, but able to just filter what comes out of your mouth before it comes out of your mouth. To always be respectful, to be respectful to everyone. Be respectful to your students. Yes, they're minors. Yes, you are you are responsible for them. Yes, you are above them in the ranking order, but you have to treat them with respect in everything that you do. You've got to be able to sit across the table from the child that has just made a horrible mistake and maybe caused some harm to the school or to an individual. And you have to be able to look at that individual and show them that you're still there for them, that you still believe in them. You have to treat them with respect in the most difficult situations. I can give a couple examples of that. On more than one occasion, I was involved in some way with a student being arrested. Maybe they had committed some crime against the school and I helped in the investigation. And ultimately that student ended up incarcerated for a period of time. When that occurred, I always went to the jail and visited that student once they were in, always. I went in and I told them that I believed in them and I believed that things could get better and that they would learn their lesson. And I wanted them to know that. I respected them even though what they did was so harsh that it actually landed them in jail. Integrity means being transparent. You're going to be transparent. People are going to see through you whether you think they do or not. So right from the very beginning, you might as well just be transparent with what you're doing, why you're doing it. You will make a lot of unpopular decisions, but if people know that you are aware that you're making an unpopular decision, but you're making it because you believe it's the right decision to be made, that's what I mean by being transparent. Own up to it. And then when I talk about being untarnished with integrity, I mean, you've got to be really careful about your personal conduct. Now, spent my career in a smaller school district in a rural area of northern Michigan. And when we went into public places, everybody knew who we were. They still do to this day, right? And so when I wanted to go have a few drinks, I didn't go to my local establishments. I went to a couple neighboring towns away where I could go and do that and not have my students' parents waiting on me, or my students sitting in that place having dinner with their families and seeing that, maybe I was letting loose a little bit. I wasn't committing any crime, but I wasn't holding myself up to the kind of standard that a student might think that I should, or a parent. And so once you lose your integrity with your staff, with your students, with your parents, with your community, it's really hard to get it back. So you have to understand that you are under a microscope, and you have to be willing to take that challenge and to know that. You have to be selfless. You have to be able to give praise and credit for people who contributed to the success of an initiative. Even though maybe you did most of the work, even though maybe it was your idea, but you have to give praise and credit to all those who were involved in that. And you have to take the blame, even if it wasn't all your blame. It's okay for you to stand up and say, you know what, we tried a new schedule and it didn't work. In the end, it wasn't a great decision. And maybe you had a committee of teachers propose the schedule to begin with, but you've got to be the one that says, it didn't work out very well. I didn't make a very good decision about that schedule. But when it goes really good, you have to say, this amazing group of teachers created this schedule, and give credit to them. When you do that, it affects your integrity immensely. People so appreciate that you're honoring other people. And you have to honor your students. You have to honor your students. You have to let them know that you value them and that you're proud of them, and that when they do something well, you recognize it. I always would say to people, here's a challenge for you. When you get a student in your office who maybe has caused some unwanted behaviors, or has had some unwanted behaviors in the classroom, or maybe caused some issues in the school somewhere, when they walk in your office as a principal, and before you even start talking about what they did, before you start talking about the consequences for what they did, what if you said to them, what could I do to make school a better place for you? Those students kind of look at you like perhaps you've lost your ever-loving mind. Like, I'm in trouble. I came to your office and you're saying, what can I do for you? It really goes a long way. It doesn't mean that you're not going to issue the correct consequence or walk through the right process. It just simply says that despite what you did, I care about you. And never take it so personal that you're not able to forgive a student because it was about you. You have to have that selflessness to say, this is not about what they did to me. This is about a decision that they made. Enthusiasm. This is one that's really important, because we are enthusiastic people when we are administrators, but there are days when you just don't feel the enthusiasm, right? But what you always have to remember is that every graduation ceremony you have is somebody's first and only graduation ceremony. Every ball game that is being played is somebody's kids in that game. You have to be able to support your students with enthusiasm and show that enthusiasm. And you know what? You need to support them outside of what is typically your responsibility. And what I mean by that is, if there's a home cross-country meet or a home track meet, and parents and students see you there, well, they just think, well, of course you're there. That's your job. This is at our school. That's why you're there. But when they see you on a Saturday at another school to watch them in that competition, all of a sudden they're thinking, wow, that person really cares about me. That's something they didn't have to do. Or when you get yourself involved and go watch them do something that maybe isn't school related, but it's important to them. Supporting your students at band concerts and all of those things. And you have to be enthusiastic, even when you don't want to go to the band concert, even when you don't want to go to the athletic event. You have to go there and show the enthusiasm. I can tell you one of my biggest downfalls was I could not stand school dances. I hated school dances. If it was only my decision, I would just say no school dances ever, ever, ever. And it took everything I had in me to be enthusiastic at a school dance, and to especially when it was on a Friday night after a long week and the music was loud and the drama was high. I had to find a way to be enthusiastic because those kids were excited, and they were excited about why they were there. And the parents standing at the door taking pictures of their kids, those parents were excited that their kids were at a dance. And I had to be enthusiastic, even when maybe I didn't feel it. And with that enthusiasm comes pride. You've got to take pride in your school and take pride in what your students are doing. And so sometimes it needs to be authentic and genuine, and people need to see it that way. But if you got to put a little fake it till you make it in there occasionally, then do that too. Become a master of that, so that people think that you just love the event so much. I must have done okay with that, because I can't tell you how many people say to me in my community, I can't believe I don't see you at any of the football games. You went to every game when you were the principal. And I feel like saying, yeah, because it was my job. But apparently they didn't realize it was my job, because I was there and I was enthusiastic. So that's good. When we talk about justice, when you are dealing with students, particularly at the secondary level, where they understand their rights and they believe probably that they have more rights than they actually have, you have to make sure that you're being just with what you're doing. You've got to make sure you're following due process. You should always assume good intentions. When someone makes a mistake, a staff member, a student, always assume that they didn't mean to do it, that they just did it wrong. You have to recognize the gray area of leadership, because, rules can seem black and white, but really most of us exist in that gray area, because rules apply to different situations based on what occurred. And you can't treat them black and white all the time. It's not fair, it's not equitable, and it's not just. And you have to be able to walk that line between making people feel like they are all being treated the same, even though you're not making the very same decision in every situation. There's a difference between being equal, which means giving everybody the same consequence, and being equitable, which means giving a consequence that helps that particular student learn and grow, or is based on what occurred in that particular student's life. That's the gray area that I talk about. Most of us start our career in that black and white world, and we learn that that's not really where we live in the job. Always investigate both sides. You might know what occurred. You might believe you know exactly what occurred, but you still must investigate both sides. And you must show that you took the time to look at both angles of what occurred. And I always say, take care of the moms. And I think I have another slide in this earlier, so I'll talk a little bit more about what I mean by take care of the moms when we get there. So I am monitoring that chat. Seems like you're just being good little listeners right now. So I'll just continue going on. You have to be knowledgeable when you are a leader. You have to be a lifelong learner. You have to realize that you've not learned it all just because you've earned a certificate or a degree. As a matter of fact, the pandemic couldn't be a better example of that, right? None of us knew how to deal with the pandemic. And we had to learn how to do it. We had to research it and study it and do the best that we could as we learned how to deal with the new situation. So you have to make sure that you are continuing to learn and study and being a good student. One of the lessons that somebody taught me about leadership early on is that I should schedule time to read. When you are in the role of a leader, you have so much information being bombarded at you, and you can so easily get yourself in a position where you are just putting out fires, just keeping the lid on things every day, and that's all you do. That you don't take the time that's necessary to step back and to grow as a leader, or to design new, to research. And so I was once told by a leader that I should schedule that time in my schedule, just like I schedule time to go in and observe this teacher between this time and this time. I should write into my schedule between 2 and 3 every Thursday, I'm going to read, do some reading, or maybe it's more time than that, I don't know, but just schedule it in there. Don't just expect that that time's going to arrive. You've got to be a good student, and you have to schedule time to be a good student. And one of the best things I can say to you when it comes to learning and being a lifelong learner is make sure that you always engage in the professional development that you bring to your school. As a facilitator of professional development all around the state and multiple different topics over the years, one of the things that I witnessed were principals and assistant principals, curriculum directors, whatever that leadership role was, who sat in that training and engaged in that training with their staff. And then I also experienced times when I would get to the school, the principal would come in and say, anything you need? Okay, I'm really busy today. I'm not going to be in the training. And left. And the message that sent to the teachers is that this training was important for them, but not important for the leader. And let's say it's a training the leader already went through. So restorative practices, for example, the leader went to restorative practices training. They thought it was great. They want to implement it in the school. So they bring a trainer in to deliver that information to their students. But they don't sit in the learning because they believe they already did it, right? Well, if you're not hearing what your teachers are hearing, and your teachers aren't seeing that you believe it's important, it's never going to be important to them. So as difficult as it is sometimes to sit, because we're not good sitters, to sit through a training and engage in it, you must make yourself do it, because you have to show that you can learn more as well. You don't know it all. Loyalty, this is a huge one. When we talk about loyalty, we talk about having a united front. We can have discussions behind the scene as leaders, and we can argue it out, and we can tell our own opinions, and we can hash it all out. But when we're done and a decision is made, we are all united. Nobody from the outside knows who was against it in the beginning, who was a little bit hesitant about it. If it's a decision that we decide, we have a united front. And that's important, because our administrative staffs, the leaders that you will work with, those teams are small, and you've got to be a cohesive group. So you've got to be loyal to those that you work with in leadership roles. You need to give loyalty, and you need to expect loyalty as well. And you'll get loyalty if you give loyalty. Be really careful that even in times when you're incredibly aggravated about something a staff member has done, don't ever discuss it, not even with your confidant who's a staff member. Because if a staff member hears you say something about another staff member, they're going to believe that you could also say that about them. Okay, so you have to be careful. You have to remain loyal to your employees. And when you're loyal to them, they'll be loyal to you. And then you have to support risk. We talked about that's about that whole giving credit for those who are taking it, but taking the blame when it doesn't go right. People, you have to take risk in order to grow. You have to make mistakes and you have to learn. And your staff, whoever works below you, they will not do that if they don't think you're going to support it if it doesn't go right. So that's also included into loyalty, is supporting risk with your staff. This, I think, is one of the most important traits: courage. You have got to have a lot of courage to be a school administrator. As a matter of fact, if somebody were to say to me, what do you think the number one trait of a school leader is? I think I would probably say courage. From what I learned, I would say that you had to be courageous. You have to be strong when others are weak. Okay, when your staff is falling apart because there's a pandemic and they have to go, they've got to go online and they're not ready for it, and then they can't even picture how that's going to occur, and you're freaking out because you don't know how it's going to occur either. It's okay to say, I don't have all the answers, but you have to show that, but we're going to get through it. We're going to get through it together. You have to show that you're courageous as you work through that. Being strong when others are weak. I can't tell you, in the time that I was a school principal, I think that I had, last time I counted, I had upwards of 20 student deaths in that time. One year I had 3 within 6 weeks. When you have a student death, you are holding up your staff members and you are holding up your students, and in some ways you're holding up your community. I will never forget the breakdown that I had when we concluded the funeral for the third student that died in that school year. I fell apart. I did it privately, but I fell apart. But people felt like I was there for them while they were going through it. Doesn't mean you're not sad. Doesn't mean you can't show that. I just mean you have to be braver than the people who are relying on you. And you have to be brave enough to rise above criticism. People are going to criticize you. You have to be brave enough to take that. You have to be brave enough to know that if you are in a leadership position, people are going to have opinions about decisions you make. I would venture to say that in many of the decisions you make, you'll have half of the people will be happy and half the people won't, in almost every decision you make. So you've got to be brave to be able to do that. And to do that, you just have to believe in your decision. One of the things as I have worked with principals, because one of the things I do is I support principals in mentoring roles throughout the state. And one of the things that I observed during this pandemic is I observed principals who were really struggling with the decisions about going virtual, being in person, the rules, the masks, and all the everything that went with that. And part of the reason they were struggling, I believe, is because they were unsure of their own belief in the situation. There's so much disbelief about the pandemic, and there's so much misinformation, and some of it's not misinformation, it's just conflicting information. We are so unsure of what we firmly believe in when it comes to that it makes it difficult for us to stand up and say, it's best that we are not in school, or it's best that we are in school, or it's best that we wear masks. It's good that they canceled sports, right? It's difficult to be brave and courageous through those things if your own belief isn't quite there yet. And so you have to be brave enough to be able to find the courage to do that. Be courageous enough and brave enough to make tough decisions. You will make tough decisions. There's no way around it. You're going to make tough decisions all the time, every day. You're going to be making tough decisions. And you have to just make sure that you believe in what you're doing and you believe you're doing it for the right reason. I had mentioned earlier that I thought that I probably made at least one mistake a day. But I can honestly say that while I made lots of mistakes, I didn't make any mistakes to hurt somebody. I didn't make any decision because I thought it would hurt somebody. Even the poor decisions I made because I believed they were right at the time. Or I made them with the information that I had at the time that I made the decision. I can honestly say that in my career. And then always commit to what is right. If you focus on what you value, what you believe in, and what you know is right and best, and you commit to that, it doesn't matter what anybody else throws at you. You can stick with that commitment. Again, talking about the whole pandemic thing and knowing what is best for students during this time. When you don't really know what's right, when you're not positive about what the best thing is, it's much more difficult to back up your own decisions. And that really causes a lot of conflict. I made lots of hard decisions, but you know what? If I believed it was the right thing, it was okay. I could make that decision and I could be brave enough to work through it. So how can a leader build trust? Trust is so incredibly important. If people don't follow you, then you're not a leader. Like Colin said, you're not a leader because that's what your position says you are. You are a leader because people follow you. And you can be a leader in the classroom, at the teacher level. You can be a leader at the student level. You can lead in good directions. You can lead in bad directions. But to be a leader, you need to have people follow you. And to follow you, they need to know that they can trust you. So here's some really easy tips about how do you, right from the very beginning of being a principal, how do you earn trust? You're on time for things. How many of you have had leaders that are 5 minutes late for everything? They schedule it and then they're 5 minutes late for it, right? You don't build trust in that. You start to think, why am I on time? The leader's not even on time. Be prepared. Don't fly by the seat of your pants. Do not gossip. I talked about that earlier. Sometimes it's hard not to get in there and say, did you hear what so-and-so did? Or what do you think about that? But when people hear you gossip, they believe that you'll gossip about them too. Keep your confidential conversations confidential. People need to know they can talk to you and that you're not going to share that information. Honor your promise. Give other people credit. Admit when you don't know something. With this whole pandemic, that's what I said to a couple of the principals. My sister is a school principal, and I happened to be with her when it was announced that the governor was closing schools the first time last March. I happened to be at her house. Within 5 minutes of the governor doing that, her staff was blowing up her phone. And I think that didn't happen until like 10:30 or 11 at night, if I remember right. They were literally blowing up her phone. What are we going to do? How are we supposed to? What do you expect? And my sister was like talking to him. And finally I said to her, the next person that calls you, say to them, I have no flipping idea. But I'm going to find the answers, and I'm going to count on you to find the answers with me. And I'm going to support you, and we're going to do it together. But you don't have to know everything. You just have to work to learn everything. Ask for feedback. Ask for feedback. That's hard. Nobody likes feedback, especially if it's not good, right? But people need to know that you're willing to hear what they have to say. And own your mistakes. Own your mistakes. You know what? I thought this was a good idea, but I see it wasn't a good idea. I didn't make a very good decision about that, and I'm sorry. What do you say to somebody who says that? I made a decision that I thought was right. And now I realize that it probably wasn't the best decision. When you say that, that's a game changer. So what's the demise of a principal? What can take a principal down faster than anything? Communication. That is what will take you down in the job of a leader faster than anything. You don't communicate with staff. You don't communicate with your students. If you don't communicate with parents, and you don't communicate with your community, that is what will take you down. Every struggling principal that I have worked with over the years, communication was the root of their problem. It had nothing to do about whether they were smart enough. It had nothing to do with whether they had the knowledge or could learn the knowledge. It had everything to do with they weren't communicating with those people who needed to be communicated with. The second thing that'll take you down faster than anything is discipline. But you know what it is about the discipline? It's a communication about discipline. People will accept the decisions you make with discipline if you just own it and say, I made this decision. I know you don't like it, but I made it. That's one thing I can say is my staff could tell you that they could tell you what I stood for. And they didn't always like it, but they knew what it was. They knew what it was. You have two groups of people when you are a school principal when it comes to discipline. You have those students and the parents and students of students who are compliant 100% of the time. They're good students. They do what's asked of them. They're good role models. And they think that you do not discipline enough. They believe that the kids who are causing trouble in your school, you're just letting them do it. You're letting them wear whatever they want to wear to school. You're letting them get away with everything. You're letting them swear in school. You're letting them and blah, 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 blah. And then you have the group of parents whose children make lots of unwanted behaviors. And you're disciplining their students constantly. And you know what they think about you? They think that you are too harsh. You're out to get kids. You lay awake at night thinking about what consequence or punishment you can hand out. And they think you're the complete opposite. So you've got 50% of your population that thinks that you are too easy on kids and 50% who thinks you're too hard on kids. Talk about a lose-lose situation, right? Until that group of kids who behave most of the time make a mistake and get in trouble, and then their parents just want to come out of their minds. Like, how could you give them that consequence? It's the first time they ever did anything wrong. Then they jump ship and they jump over to the other side. So just know that going into it. But typically, if you will communicate with staff about the discipline, and I don't mean about discipline that doesn't pertain to them, discipline with students that pertain to them, you will find that you'll do better than if you don't lack that communication. It's all about your building climate. I love this quote. School climate is like the air we breathe. It tends to go unnoticed until something is seriously wrong. You need to know that your student achievement will not be maximized until students feel safe and valued. Teacher effectiveness will not increase if they don't feel supported and appreciated. As a leader, you have to keep a good pulse on what's going on with climate. And we could spend absolutely the whole day talking about school climate. I love the topic. I love to train on it. I love to discuss it. But we're going to talk about some things coming up now, some strategies that will help improve your school climate and your school culture. And when you do that, your job will be a ton easier. Your leadership role will be a ton easier. So here are some game changers, I think, game changers that I experienced and that I've guided people on and I've seen in their roles too. Being collaborative. Build a teacher leadership team. Who's on that teacher leadership team? Whoever the teachers pick to be on it. Because remember, you have to be followed to be a leader. And if you pick the leaders, that they may not be who teachers think are the leaders. So you let your teachers pick their own leadership team that's going to collaborate with you. You're going to meet with them regularly and they're going to help you keep the pulse about what's going on. Game changer when I created a teacher leadership team. I didn't pick it, but I created it. We met once a week. We met every Wednesday from 7:30 till 8 a.m. Half hour every Wednesday. We had an open agenda. We shared a Google Doc. People could put anything in there they wanted to talk about. And when we got to the meeting, we just discussed it. I wasn't in charge of the meeting. Nobody was in charge of the meeting. We were a group collaboratively discussing what was going on and what we could do. Let me tell you, when you go to your teacher leadership team and you say, let's plan the professional development coming up next month. Let's plan it together. And they help you plan it. And then you go, all right, well, we have a staff meeting coming up next week. Who's going to tell the staff what we're going to do at the PD? And one of your leadership team members said, I'll talk to them about it. Do you think your teachers are going to buy into that training more or less when that occurs? That weight comes off your shoulders because you aren't the one who decided it. Their leaders helped decide it. Okay. Same thing goes for a student leadership team. Even more important because students are your number one priority. They are your most important stakeholder. You should have a student leadership team. Now, I don't mean your student council. I mean, you should have that, but that's not who I'm talking about. I'm not talking about your National Honor Society students. I'm not talking about people who are already your proven leaders. I'm talking about a diverse group of students that you select that will help counsel you on issues in the school. They help you keep the pulse to make sure you understand what's going on in school. You don't meet with them. I didn't meet with them once a week. You could. I met with them less frequently. But when I met with them, for example, let's say we just finished homecoming week. I would meet with this diverse group of students and I'd say, what'd you think about homecoming? And I asked this group, I knew what the athletes thought about homecoming. They think it's like the best thing in the world, right? Student council love it because they helped design it. But how about the kids who are not athletes? You think they loved it? Our PEP assemblies got so much better because I listened to what a diverse group of students had to say about them. So we might have a PEP assembly where we might introduce the varsity football team, wish them good luck on their game tonight, but then we're going to bring out the kids who have their own band and they're going to play a song for us. You start honoring and those kinds of kids and you start working in that population, changes your climate. Okay, I called them my principal's council. And I would bring them together and they would help me when we had to talk about it. They had the best solutions. I could bring up like, what am I going to do, you guys, about tardies? Tardies are completely out of control. I've got to get them under control. What are we going to do? Oh my gosh, they would have the best solutions in the world for tardies. And then they would share with their peers. This is what's going to happen if you're tardy. And the students are going, you got to have a say, and you were able to have a say in what we're going to do about tardies. Game changer. Same with the parent council. I only had a parent council for certain situations. I didn't always have a parent council, but let's say when I was when we were making a decision about changing the master schedule in a major way, I brought a group of diverse parents together and said, how do you think this new schedule would affect your child? I just got some counsel from parents that. Game changers, be the hardest worker. And I truly mean that. You just have to be the hardest worker. You've got to be up for it. Again, give credit to others. I know this is in there a million times, but I pulled these slides from different things, but I can't repeat that enough. And just be okay with tackling tough issues. Okay, when things are bothering people, tackle them, come up, work with a group of people to get the solutions solved, and your culture will get better. How did I do some of these things? I heard this somewhere. I didn't make this up, but I followed it. Kiss your ugly duckling first thing in the morning. If you are a leader, whatever it is you are dreading doing the most that day, do it first thing in the morning. If I knew I had to talk to a staff member about something, I took care of it first thing in the morning. Because if I didn't, it was gonna weigh on me all day, and then I was still gonna have to do it, right? I always did icebreakers. I would send an email the night before that say, can you come see me on your prep hour? I'd like to discuss what occurred in class yesterday or whatever it was. Once you break that ice, now that meeting's going to occur. No more avoiding it. But take that thing that's going to weigh you down all day and check it off your list first thing in the morning. Call that parent who you know is going to yell and scream at you. Call them in the morning. Get it out of the way. Take care of the moms. I have somebody send a private message about it that, what if the moms are impossible to accommodate and they negatively impact your culture? Here's what I mean by take care of the moms, okay? I always knew that if I could get the moms, and when I say moms, sometimes the mom is the dad or the grandma. It's really that who plays that mom role, right? The person who is the most nurturing to that student that you're dealing with. It could be anybody. But when you say to a parent, when you got to call them and say, I caught your child smoking and they're suspended from school for 5 days, that parent, that's not a fun call to make. And that parent's going to say, how do you know? Everybody's always blaming my kid. But when you say, something, Miss Jones, I know that this is not okay with you. I know that you don't allow this in your home. Your child just made a mistake. Whoa, what are they going to say? You took care of their feelings. Right? You were considerate to them. It just changes the game. Okay. So take care of the moms. When you're dealing with a difficult student, talk with the mom. Say, help me understand the best way to deal with your child. Help me understand some things that I'm not understanding about your child. Nobody loves your child more than you do. I could never love them as much as you do. So help me understand the best way to deal with your child. Maybe after there's been a big fight at school and a kid is suspended and you get through all that stuff, maybe that evening at 7 o'clock you call and you just talk to the mom and you say, hey, I'm just calling to check on you. I know this is really rough. I can't imagine if this happened to me, how I would feel right now. I just want to make sure you're okay. And is there anything else any other questions I can answer? Okay. So that's what I mean about take care of the moms. I love this one too. Some of these stuff came out of the books. I'm going to show you these books in a minute. Again, I told you not most of this is not authentically from me. Make decisions based on how the best teacher in your building will be affected. So when you're saying, all right, I'm thinking about changing the master schedule. You would never do that alone anyway, but as you're processing it, think about that teacher and say, what is that teacher going to think about this schedule? Or go ask that teacher, right? You can't make your decisions based on the teacher who is always going to find something wrong with every decision you make. Build a great relationship with law enforcement. Hanging on my wall back here, I know you can't read it. This is my home office, but I have a big plaque that says meritorious accommodations from the Sheriff's Department in my town. I got this on the day that I retired. And the sheriff made a presentation, and he actually said that I was the best cop the county ever had. And I kind of laugh at that. But what he meant by that is he meant that I was all in helping our community be better. And I worked with them. I helped them. They helped me. We had a great relationship. I knew if I needed them, they would be there in 1 second flat. And they knew if they needed me, I would do the same thing for them. If they needed some time to chat, to kind of put together a puzzle of, what kid does this kid know and that kind of a thing, I would take the time and I would actually talk to them and help them with that information. We had a great relationship, and it's one that you really need to have. We talked about having the courage to handle undue criticism. We already talked about that because you're going to get it. You're going to get it. But do not let people walk all over you. Do not let people walk all over you. Nobody has a right to scream and swear at you. Nobody has a right to do that. And you have the right to say, if you can't lower your voice, or if you can't stop swearing at me, I'm not going to have this conversation anymore. This conversation is over. So while they can be mad at you, you don't have to let them yell and scream at you. They can't walk all over you. Okay? They can put on Facebook that they think you're a horrible principal, and you know what? You can't do anything about it. Nothing you can do about it. That's why you're just best not to have them any connection with them on Facebook, because then you don't have to read it, right? But if they say you're a horrible principal because you're dating a student, boom, do not put up with that. That is something you can do something about. Okay, so don't sweat the stuff where they're just calling you this, that, and whatever. But if they start to harm your reputation with false information, that's what I mean by don't let people walk all over you. Do not let them. Keep searching until you find your grant. We studied this book in my leadership team when I was a school principal a few years back, Lincoln on Leadership. And I didn't, at first I didn't get it. I'm like, what the heck? Lincoln on Leadership, it was abstract, it was difficult. But in the end, I learned so much about leadership from this book. And one of the things that, that Lincoln did is he found his grant. He kept going through people until he found the person that was loyal to him. And he always put the right people in the right positions. If you've got teachers who are not in the right, teaching at the right grade level, or who are teaching classes that they're not doing a really good job at, then you need to move them. You need to put them in a different position. You've got to put them in the right position. Of course, that's after you help them and mentor them and provide them guidance. I'm not saying that you don't do all that stuff. I'm just saying you don't let them stay there because they've always been there. You have to put them in the right positions. This is obvious. Keep your room clean. I did this better professionally than I did personally. I have 2 adult children, both are married, and they were home visiting not very long ago, and my one daughter was upstairs, and I heard her yell, "Mom!" And I said, "What? Since when don't we make our beds when we get up in the morning?" Well, I said, when you were home, we always led by example, and we always made our beds in the morning and kept our room clean. But you're gone, and you know what? We don't keep our room clean right now. But that's what we mean by keep your space clean. It just shows that you have it together, that you're tidy. If you ever walked in an administrator's office that looks like, oh my God, how did they even find the table? I mean, that tells you something about them right there, right? So even if you have to have boxes under your table and every few days you just throw stuff in boxes, but give a organized and clean appearance. It'll say a lot about you as a leader. And then lastly, sincerely care about your staff and students. Sincerely care about your staff and students. Some of the nicest things that people said about me when I retired was just that I always treated them like family, and that I always cared about what was going on in their lives. And I sincerely did, about my teachers and my staff and my students. If you're not the kind of person who can do that, this is probably not the field for you. This is a people field, okay? And so you've got to make sure that you can really sincerely and truly care about the people that you work with. After all, it's so much harder to be mean to people who you know care about you. So do you ever have that person who just irritates you so bad? Like you see them coming and you just want to go, no, they're coming. But you can't be mean to them because they're so nice to you. Doesn't matter how much they irritate you. They are so kind to you all the time that you could never close the door on them. You could never be mean to them. That's kind of how the world works. When you treat people nice, they'll find it difficult to not be nice back to you. So here are some good books. I'm gonna make this available for you, this slideshow in PDF form, so you'll have these. But these are some of the books that I have found helpful over the years that deal with leadership. There's tons more. Most leadership books are really pretty easy reads, especially if they're about leadership in a field that you're interested in. Lincoln on Leadership is a more difficult read because it's just about leadership in general. But when you read things about what great principals do differently, it applies to my job and it's much more interesting to read. So this might be something that you put an hour in your week, that for 1 week, every Wednesday for that 1 hour, you sit down and you read out of the leadership book. Okay, that's the kind of thing I'm talking about, but I'll provide that for you. So today we set out to talk about different kinds of leadership styles, to talk about the common traits of successful school administrators, and then to talk about some of the strategies that will help you be a better leader. And I hope that we were able to do that today. And I hope that you learned a little bit about what it takes to be a leader in the administration of a school. And again, most of this is not new to you. So sometimes you have to think about it when you're thinking about the position that you're going to be in. It means something different to you when you're starting to think about leadership, to talk about these things. So before I let you go, I just want to make sure for those of you who are thinking about being leaders, that you are aware of MASSP's Path to Leadership program. So to be an administrator in the state of Michigan, you have to have the MDE issued school administrator certificate. There are 2 ways to get that certificate. You get a master's degree in educational administration, and most of those programs result in this certificate. Not all, so you're going to want to make sure that the program you choose does, but most do now. And the second way is to go through the alternative path, which is open for those people who have educational backgrounds, who have experience, but don't want to go back and get their master's degree. Most people will already have a master's degree in curriculum or teaching, and they don't want to go back and get another one. This program is 100% online. It's approved by MDE, and it costs 1/3 of the cost of a master's degree. The maximum cost is $7,025. And when you go back to get a master's, you're talking about $30,000 or $40,000, and you get the very same certificate. And it comes with a flexible schedule. So you'll learn more about that if you're going to stick with this whole series. But I just wanted to throw that out there for any of you who may not have been aware of the Path to Leadership program through MASSP.
Excuse me.
Yes, 2 minutes to 5. I'm going to go through just a couple updates, and then I'm going to stay on for anybody who wants to talk about anything. Mohammed, is that something is a question you have right now, or do you want to talk about that after we're done here?
$7,025.
$7,025, and that will get you the certificate.
Can I get 2 of them, please?
Wow. All right, that's a good one. We can talk about that in a second.
Shoot.
Before I give you the update, though, I think this is a really good one for you to listen to. And if any of you know this guy, you appreciate him. And so I'm going to stop sharing for just 1 second. Go ahead. I can hear you. Go ahead while I'm fixing something here.
Hey, Mohammed, while you was talking about you can pay for 2, can you get one for me?
Okay, hold on. I have to fix my sound here so that you're going to be able to make sure. Okay, I'm doing it. Okay.
I'm very excited today to share with you some tips I have for getting interviews and doing well on interviews to get a job. I know it's a season where student teachers and teachers are looking for new jobs. So I have some suggestions. First is when you take your resume into a school, you just need to put it on the secretary's desk and slowly slide it to the secretary. And then when she picks it up, bam, you've hidden a big old honking chocolate bar underneath the resume. I call it the secret chocolate bar. Put a big old smile on her face. You know what she's going to do with your resume? Run it on back there to the principal's office. One of the things I like to do too is on my resume, I like to dab a little vanilla in each corner, and then I get some of these delicious pineapple slices and I rub it on the back of the paper on my resume and I let it dry. It ends up smelling like one of them pina colada drinks. And then when the principal opens it up, they're like, "Ooh, what does this smell? It smells like the Caribbean. I think I need to interview this person." And then another suggestion I have is when you go in for an interview and you're shaking the teacher's hands, that you just hide a flare pen in your hand. So when you shake their hand, you give them the flare pen. And when they look at you, you just go, kind of like saying, "There's more where that came from." And that way, maybe they'll hire you for their team. Good luck in your interviews.
And so, again, for those of you who are ready to cut out, I just want to say thank you for attending today. If ever I can be of help to you in any way, anytime you want to discuss anything, don't hesitate to pop me off an email. Happy to talk to you about anything as you start to consider your pursuing such a position. But I am going to give just a couple of updates that might pertain to you as in your current positions, and then stick on to anybody who wants to talk. But for anybody who is just here for the guts of the presentation, feel free to go ahead and sign off, but I'll continue on for a couple of minutes for those of you who want to stick through the next updates. So a couple updates that might affect you. If your teaching or administrative certificate expires this June, now would be the time to start applying for that renewal process in your MOAX account. It's better to start now. I think you can start after December 1, I believe, is the time when you can start that application. Just in case you run into any problems, you've got some time to figure it out. You don't want to wait until May and then all of a sudden realize that you're a couple sketches short and then have to figure out how to get those. So if you expire in this June, go ahead and start that application process. Just know that Michigan Virtual offers several professional development courses where you can earn sketches if you are short of renewing your certificate. Many of them are free of charge, and those that aren't free are very low cost. They're all online, and you can access that in their catalog, which is on their website. And also know that a lot of their free PD right now is surrounding best practices in virtual teaching. So it's really applicable to what's going on right now in the classroom. I actually just learned this. I don't know how new this is. It's fairly new, but I almost fell off my chair when I read this morning. Currently, there is legislation been introduced to permit anyone with a high school diploma to be a substitute teacher for the remainder of the school year. So I don't know if that's going to fly, that's going to be approved, but that's been introduced. And that's something that's kind of new. So we'll see where that goes. And I also wanted to let you know that if your school uses the 5D plus evaluation framework, we, MASSP, put together an online introductory to that 5D framework. So if you know somebody who's new in your school and who wants to learn more about the evaluation, they can access this. Or maybe you've been in that using that framework for several years, but you just want a refresher, MASSP has that newly created. So you can also access that on the website, and that is free as well for anybody. So that's specific to 5D plus teacher evaluation. So those are the updates, the 4 things that I thought pertain to you most in the positions that you're currently in as aspiring administrators. And I am happy to stay on for anybody who wants to talk about anything. And you can just unmute yourself and ask a question. And if you don't have anything to talk about, I'll see you in the next session. And thanks again for being here and for being patient while I chatted at you for an hour.